Hello, my name is Lewis White and welcome to my summative assignment presentation, Subject Knowledge for Teaching-Based Practice. The resource I am presenting today is a laminated A4 sheet to aid students in finding the notes on the keyboard and helping them to know where those notes are situated on the stave. This will be explored further later in this presentation. Although our keyboards are used by a wide range of students in the school, the resource I have adapted has mainly been used by Year 9 students. This is because they have been focusing on keyboard skills during the last term, which is their reggae module. In the wider sequence of learning, the resource will be used by Year 9 in the next module, which focuses on electronic dance music. But the students will still be working on their keyboard skills. Also included in this presentation is an annotated lesson plan for a Year 9 reggae lesson where the students were tasked with learning the melody to Three Little Birds by Bob Marley. This is a 7-note hook that uses the major scale and is instantly recognizable to help engage students and get them making music straight away. This will be analyzed in more detail later. I have carried out related academic reading in order to present my assignment and resource. This includes texts from a selection of authors. The purpose of this presentation is to critically analyse how my resource has benefited student learning in the Year 9 music classroom. I will analyse the benefits and negatives of my resource and how it made an impact on student learning, including students with special educational needs. For the sake of clarity, the resource is not one I have made, but I have adapted. The resource combines the bass and treble clef and notes on the stave. The red middle C matches the red C stickers that are already on instruments in the classroom. From a physical standpoint, the resource is A4 sized and I have chosen to laminate it so it sits on a keyboard music stand on its own. It also gives an opportunity for a teacher to annotate the resource with a dry marker in the future. The resource could be used by one student per instrument, although in reality there are often more, so 2 students playing at the same time on the same keyboard in a lesson. The use of musical notation can be a controversial topic in music education, as it can overwhelm students and create confusion when music making should be the focus. In their book, Lesson Planning for Effective Learning, Faultley and Savage say, in its most basic form, the subject is the student, the object is to play a piece of music, and this is done through the use of tools such as instruments, musical notation, physical gestures, etc. The individual cannot play the music without the instrument, and the instrument cannot play without the student. Therefore, it is the mediation between the two that fulfills the object of producing the music. In general, Year 9 music at Thomas Alleyne Academy focuses on keyboard skills that have been built upon from Year 8. Philpott and Plummeridge outline the importance of electronic keyboards by saying, consequently, modern electric keyboards have historically made a greater contribution to secondary education, not only as classroom performance instruments, but also in the preparation of examination coursework, when used in conjunction with computers. The electronic keyboard allows for complete music to be played, and a range of voices means that students are able to emulate many different instruments. This is ideal in an academic environment, where space is an issue, and the range of instruments we have available is not extensive. There are some musical practitioners that offer a different viewpoint on this matter. In his book, Teaching Music Musically, Keith Swanick says, to be able to say in music only what we can write in notation negates both musical expressiveness and the musical discourse of students. Here, Swanwick suggests that students could be confined to only playing the notes they can read on a page, rather than developing composition skills or improvisation skills. My resource only features the white keys, so it is limited to natural notes only. In this respect, the resource could be improved to show the notes on the black keys. This was an issue in the actual lesson because the reggae hook included the note C sharp, which some students were not familiar with. Clint Randall says, however, the development of proper keyboard technique depends on learning to listen for subtle graduations and improvements in tone quality that occur as a result of increasingly effective playing mechanics. Randall highlights another potential drawback of the resource is that students may be more focused on playing the correct note rather than improving their keyboard technique. This is particularly important on an acoustic piano, which some of our students use in practical lessons. Yet the value of notation as a remembering and transmitting device is not always needed and is now more than ever under question, thanks to microtechnology and especially sophisticated recording techniques. In much music making, it is no longer essential. Here, Keith Swanwick argues that notation may not even be necessary in today's music classroom, particularly as technology is getting better and better and more musicians are accessing music through a digital audio workstation. Some of the more modern class keyboards feature the same facility of the resource by showing the name of the note on the keyboard screen. This is the spiral of musical development, created by Swanwick and Tillman in 1986. Swanwick and Tillman's spiral is a model for music education. It shows the journey a music student would take from mastery to being able to deliver music systematically. Another way of thinking of this is that students are able to reproduce the music without thinking how they would play something. Using the resource meant that students were not having to rely on their memory to remember where the notes were on the keyboard. This allowed them to progress up the spiral of musical development from the sensory stage to the imitation stage. Students without the resource may be limited by the cognitive overload that would occur by them trying to remember the notes on the keyboard and recreate the reggae hook. This would place them in the manipulation stage of the spiral. Music in classes is particularly difficult to organise to take account of individual aspirations compared, say, with literature or the visual arts. It is a social activity and must remain so to a large extent, even with the rapid spread of computerised keyboard stations within classrooms. The organisational difficulties that Swanwick is describing here were particularly relevant to my lesson because in Thomas Alleyne Academy Music Department there are 4 rooms that the students use with different types of keyboard and some acoustic pianos. The resource also is limited in that it is an individual resource rather than a group one, because it has to be placed on top of a keyboard, so only 2 students at a time could see it. This curriculum, which almost all the pupils in all the schools had been following for the preceding 2 years at secondary school, as well as previously in primary school, is highly practical. It involves a range of activities including listening, playing instruments, singing, composing, and improvising, much of which is done in small groups. It places little emphasis on theory or notation, although teachers often use worksheets with some guidance or stimulus, such as a collection of notes or a film, to aid performance or composition work. Here, Green outlines a typical situation in a music classroom that teachers may face. Although the students I'm teaching are in Year 9, when I teach Year 7 students using my resource, they may have no experience of notation whatsoever. Therefore, the reason I have chosen to use my resource is to help bridge the gap between the students to create a more equitable learning environment. The resource could be improved in a number of different ways. One way it could be improved is for it to just have the treble clef. The treble clef and the bass clef being included could create some confusion for some students. In addition to this, the stems of the notes are the incorrect way round, which could cause confusion to students that already know how to read music. From a physical standpoint, even though the resource is printed on A4 paper, which makes it easy for students to see, the keys do not match up with the keyboard keys exactly for size. Some students may find it hard to differentiate between the smaller keys on the resource to the actual physical keys on the keyboard. In addition to this, it would be very tedious to colour every key on every keyboard in the music department. The red middle C on the resource matches the instruments in the music department, but the rest of the C's on the resource are blue. Therefore, an improvement would be to make my own version of the resource, where the colours of the stickers match the stickers on existing instruments in the classroom. Overall, the resource has had a positive impact on students' learning. I was able to measure this through observing students during their practice time of learning the reggae hook to 3 Little Birds and in other lessons. In the actual lesson, the resource was placed on the keyboard music stand and piano music stand in the practice rooms. The lesson plan allowed for time for myself to explain to the students about the resource and how it would help them. For example, how to find the first note of the reggae hook, which is A. In addition to this, I also overheard students talking about using the resource, which meant that peer-to-peer learning was taking place, similar to what Swanwick was saying when he said, "It is a social activity and must remain so to a large extent." The impact on students moving forward is that once they have played the note C enough times, knowing where that note is on the keyboard will no longer be in their working memory and it will move into their long-term memory, which in turn will speed up the process of learning new pieces in the future. The students will also be able to utilise those skills to improvise music. SEND students have found using the resource extremely beneficial during the lessons. The rainbow style colouring on the resource means that students that find it difficult to see colour would still be able to differentiate between the notes. The resource is also beneficial for English as an additional language student because, apart from the word middle C, there is no written English on it. This means students that have weaker English skills can still engage with the resource. The objective with notation is to visually represent what is heard. Pre-written material just cuts out the middleman. Consider presenting these tasks in the smallest chunks possible. Hamill and Hurrigan demonstrate the ideal strategy for teaching notation to students with SEND needs. Using my resource can turn the exercise into a colour matching game, rather than a strict music theory or notation lesson. Although it is reasonably uncommon in music lessons, there are sometimes teaching assistants present. Using my resource allows a TA that may not have any prior experience in music or playing the piano or keyboard to teach a student they're working with. In conclusion, I feel that the resource has had a positive impact on students' learning and development, specifically for the Year 9s learning the keyboard melody of 3 Little Birds. The resource is not without imperfection. However, the main purpose of the resource is to reduce cognitive load in the students, which would support their learning of new material. The resource can also be used for any music lesson that involves keyboards, and it represents the repeating nature of the musical alphabet, making it ideal for music teachers and students alike. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation. I invite you to look at my bibliography, which details sources of academic reading featured in this presentation.